For over a century, society has worshipped a single number. We test it in our children. We use it to get into college. We use it to decide who is a genius and who is average. That number is your IQ. We were told a very simple story: if you have a high IQ, you will get good grades. If you get good grades, you will get a great job. And if you get a great job, you will be successful and happy. But look around you. Does the real world actually work that way? Think about the smartest kid in your high school class, the valedictorian with the perfect SAT score. Are they running the world today? Often, they are working for the C student. Think about the brilliant software engineer who is an absolute genius with code, but keeps getting fired because he cannot handle criticism and alienates his entire team. Think about the marriages that fall apart, not because the couple isn't smart, but because they simply do not know how to communicate when they are angry. If IQ is the ultimate predictor of success, why do so many smart people make such terrible, catastrophic messes of their lives? Welcome to the Book Vault, the essence of every book. Emotional Intelligence: Why It Can Matter More Than IQ by Daniel Goleman. In 1995, Dr. Daniel Goleman, a science journalist for the New York Times, dropped a psychological bombshell on the world. He analyzed decades of cutting-edge neuroscience and discovered a shocking statistic: your IQ accounts for, at best, only 20% of the factors that determine your success in life. The other 80%? It comes down to a completely different set of skills. It comes down to how you handle frustration, how you read the facial expressions of others, how you control your impulses, and how you bounce back from failure. It comes down to your emotional intelligence, EQ. Chapter 1: The Two Minds. If you want to stop saying things you regret, and stop letting your anger or anxiety ruin your life, you must first understand the machinery inside your own skull. Dr. Goleman teaches us that we do not have one mind. We have two. You have a rational mind, and you have an emotional mind. And they operate on completely different biological hardware. Narrator: The evolutionary blueprint. To understand this, we have to travel back in time. Millions of years ago, when our ancient ancestors were trying to survive in the wild, the human brain began to develop. The very first part of the brain to form was the brainstem, which controls basic survival, breathing and heartbeat. Growing directly out of that primitive brainstem was the limbic system. This is the emotional mind. The emotional mind was designed for one thing: keeping you alive. It is the seat of all passion, fear, rage, and love. The very root of the word emotion comes from the Latin verb motere, which means to move. Emotions are biological impulses designed to make you take immediate, physical action. When a caveman saw a predator, the emotional mind triggered fear. Fear drained the blood from his face and sent it to his legs so he could run. When a caveman faced an enemy, the emotional mind triggered anger. Anger pumped blood to his hands so he could grasp a weapon and fight. For millions of years, the emotional mind ran the show. Narrator: The arrival of logic. Millions of years later, a new layer grew over the top of the emotional mind. This is the neocortex. The neocortex is the rational mind. It is the part of the brain that analyzes data, calculates math, reads books, and plans for the future. It is the seat of logic. In a perfectly healthy human being, these two minds work together. The emotional mind provides the passion and the gut feeling, and the rational mind provides the logic and the strategy. But here is the biological catch, the ultimate design flaw of human evolution: the emotional mind is millions of years older, and thousands of times faster, than the rational mind. Because our biology was designed for physical survival, our brains are hardwired to feel before we think. In the modern world, this is a massive problem. You are no longer running from saber-toothed tigers. You are dealing with passive-aggressive emails, traffic jams, and stressful performance reviews. But your ancient brain doesn't know the difference. When your modern life triggers your ancient emotional hardware, the result is chaos. Chapter 2: The Amygdala Hijack. Have you ever been in an argument with someone you love, and suddenly, you snap. You say something incredibly cruel, something you know will deeply hurt them. 10 seconds later, the anger fades, and you think to yourself, why on earth? The exact second the amygdala hits the panic button, it completely overrides the rest of the brain. It floods your body with adrenaline and cortisol. It increases your heart rate. And most importantly, it literally disconnects the pathway to your logical neocortex. Your thinking brain is temporarily shut down. You are legally, biologically, temporarily insane. You are acting entirely on primal, unfiltered emotion. This is an amygdala hijack. It is why smart people do incredibly stupid things when they are angry. It is why you slam doors, yell at your children, or send aggressive emails at 2 a.m. In that precise moment, your IQ drops to zero. Your emotional brain has taken the steering wheel, and your logical brain is locked in the trunk. The amygdala hijack kept our ancestors alive when they encountered wild animals. But in the modern corporate office, or in a marriage, the amygdala hijack is a weapon of mass destruction. You cannot stop the amygdala from ringing the alarm. It is biological. But emotional intelligence is the science of learning how to keep your logical brain awake during the alarm, so you can choose how to respond, rather than simply reacting. How do we do that? We must build the first pillar of EQ. Chapter 3, Self-Awareness. Dr. Goleman breaks emotional intelligence down into 5 distinct pillars. If you want to prevent the amygdala hijack and take control of your life, you cannot skip straight to managing others. You must start from within. Pillar number 1 is self-awareness, knowing your emotions. This sounds incredibly simple, but the vast majority of human beings are completely unaware of their own emotions while they are happening. Narrator, the 3 styles of dealing with emotion. Goleman points to research showing that people generally fall into one of 3 categories when a strong emotion hits. 1. The engulfed. These people are entirely swallowed by their emotions. When they feel angry, they become the anger. They have absolutely no perspective. They feel helpless, they scream, they cry, and they believe they have no control over their emotional life. They are drowning in the river. 2. The accepting. These people know they are in a bad mood, but they do nothing to change it. They just accept it. I'm just an angry person today, deal with it. 3. The self-aware. These people have developed a psychological superpower. They can experience a massive, overwhelming emotion, but simultaneously maintain a detached, neutral awareness of it. Self-awareness is the ability to step out of the emotional storm and stand on the balcony of your own mind. Imagine you are at work, and your boss criticizes your project in front of the entire team. Instantly, your amygdala rings the alarm. Your face gets hot. The adrenaline spikes. The anger rises in your chest. If you are engulfed, you will immediately snap back, insult your boss, and get fired. But if you are self-aware, you activate your logical neocortex. In the exact split second that the heat rises in your chest, your observing mind steps onto the balcony and looks down at your body. You do not say, I am angry. If you say, I am angry, you are identifying as the emotion itself. Instead, the self-aware person says, I am experiencing the feeling of anger right now. This is not just a semantic trick. It is a neurological hack. Brain imaging scans show that the exact moment you consciously identify and name an emotion, saying to yourself, I feel anxiety building in my stomach, you force electrical activity to move out of the emotional amygdala and into the logical prefrontal cortex. The simple act of putting a label on a feeling literally lowers the biological intensity of that feeling. You are transferring the steering wheel back to the logical brain. Self-awareness does not mean you stop feeling angry, sad, or terrified. Emotional intelligence is not about turning yourself into an unfeeling robot. It simply means that you recognize the emotion the exact millisecond it arrives. Chapter 4, Self-Regulation. Self-awareness is knowing what you feel. Self-regulation is the ability to manage those feelings so they do not hijack your life. It is the ability to soothe yourself, to shake off rampant anxiety, gloom, or irritability. People who are poor at this skill are constantly battling feelings of distress. People who excel at it can bounce back from life's setbacks and upsets much more rapidly. To master self-regulation, we must start with the most seductive, overpowering, and dangerous emotion of all, anger. Anger is unique because it is incredibly energizing. When you are sad, you feel lethargic. But when you are angry, your amygdala floods your body with catecholamines, chemicals that generate a massive, thrilling rush of energy. Anger makes you feel powerful. Anger makes you feel self-righteous. Because anger feels so empowering, we love to feed it. When someone cuts you off in traffic, your brain immediately invents a narrative to justify the anger. That guy is a selfish idiot. He has no respect for anyone. I should teach him a lesson. Every time you repeat that story in your head, you pump more adrenaline into your bloodstream. You are literally intoxicating yourself with rage. For decades, popular
psychology told us that if you are angry, you need to vent. They said, punch a pillow, scream into the void, let it all out, or it will boil up inside you. Daniel Goleman analyzes the neuroscience and proves that this is a complete and total fallacy. Venting anger is the absolute worst thing you can do. Why? Because the brain learns by repetition. When you punch a pillow, scream, or rant to your friends about how much you hate your boss, you are not releasing the anger. You are actively rehearsing it. You are keeping the amygdala highly stimulated. Venting prolongs the biological arousal of the brain, keeps the fire burning. Narrator. The 2 cures for anger. If you cannot vent, how do you regulate rage? Goleman offers 2 scientifically proven interventions. 1. Cognitive reframing, challenging the trigger. Anger is fueled by the story you tell yourself. To kill the anger, you must rewrite the story before the anger reaches its peak. If a car cuts you off, instead of saying, he's a selfish idiot, you force your logical brain to reframe it. Maybe there is a medical emergency in that car. Maybe he is rushing his child to the hospital. It doesn't matter if it's true. The exact second you introduce compassion or an alternative logical explanation, the amygdala stops pumping adrenaline. The rage instantly deflates. 2. The physical cooling off. If you are already in a screaming match, cognitive reframing will not work. Your logical brain is completely offline. At this point, you must use the physical cooling off method. You must completely remove yourself from the trigger for a minimum of 20 minutes. That is the exact biological time it takes for the adrenaline and heart rate to return to a baseline state. Walk away. Do not ruminate on the argument. Do not plan what you will say next. Distract your brain completely. Read a book, go for a run, or watch a comedy. You cannot think your way out of a physiological hijack. You must physically wait for the chemicals to leave your bloodstream. Chapter 5. Soothing anxiety and melancholy. Anger is an explosion. Anxiety is a slow, suffocating poison. Worry is the heart of anxiety. In its healthy form, worry is a survival mechanism. It makes you prepare for a test or buy insurance. But in the emotionally hijacked brain, worry becomes chronic rumination. When you are anxious, your mind enters a catastrophic loop. You think about one bad thing, which leads to a worse thing, which leads to total disaster. The amygdala interprets these imagined thoughts as real, physical threats, keeping your body in a constant state of low-level panic. To regulate anxiety, Goleman prescribes a 2-step process. 1. Catch the loop early. Anxiety is highly hypnotic. You can worry for 45 minutes before you even realize you are doing it. You must use your self-awareness to catch the very first "what if" thought. 2. Adopt a critical stance. Once you catch the worry, you must cross-examine it like a ruthless lawyer. Ask yourself, what is the actual mathematical probability that this catastrophic event will happen? Is there any concrete evidence to support this fear? Are there constructive steps I can take right now to prepare? If there is a constructive step, take it. If there is not, you must realize that worrying is entirely useless. You must actively break the cycle by shifting your attention to a complex mental task or physical exercise. What about melancholy and depression? Note, Goleman distinguishes between clinical, chemical depression, which requires medical intervention, and the everyday sadness, grief, and melancholy that we all experience. When we are sad, our biological instinct is to isolate ourselves. We want to close the blinds, lie in bed, and think about how sad we are. Just like venting anger, ruminating on sadness makes it vastly worse. If you sit alone and think about the breakup, you plunge yourself deeper into the abyss. To regulate everyday sadness, you must engineer a state change. 1. Aerobic exercise. It is biologically impossible to maintain a deep state of melancholy while your heart rate is elevated at 140 beats per minute during a run. Exercise changes your brain chemistry, releasing endorphins that naturally combat sadness. 2. Engineered triumphs. When you are sad, you feel helpless. You must engineer a small, undeniable victory. Clean your kitchen. Finish a small work project. Help someone who is worse off than you. Taking action proves to your brain that you are not helpless, breaking the paralysis of melancholy. The lesson: emotions are not commands. They are suggestions. You do not have to act on your anger. You do not have to surrender to your anxiety. You do not have to isolate in your sadness. When you learn to regulate your internal climate, you stop being a victim of your own biology. You become the master of the control room. Chapter 6. Motivation. We now move to pillar number 3 of emotional intelligence, motivation. Emotional
intelligence is not just about suppressing negative emotions. It is about channeling your emotions toward a productive goal. It is the ability to use your emotional energy to fuel relentless drive, enthusiasm, and persistence. To understand the core of self-motivation, we must look at one of the most famous psychological experiments in human history, the Stanford Marshmallow Experiment. In the 1960s, psychologist Walter Mischel brought 4-year-old children into a room, one by one. He placed a marshmallow in front of them and offered a deal: "You can eat this marshmallow right now. But I have to leave the room for 15 minutes. If you do not eat it while I am gone, I will give you 2 marshmallows when I get back." It was a test of delayed gratification. Some children ate the marshmallow the exact second the door closed. They could not handle the impulse. Other children agonized. They covered their eyes. They sang songs to distract themselves. They sat on their hands. They managed to wait the full 15 minutes, and they earned the second marshmallow. If the experiment had ended there, it would just be a cute story about children and candy. But the researchers tracked these children for the next 15 years, into their high school graduation. The results completely shattered the scientific community's understanding of success. The 4-year-olds who immediately ate the marshmallow grew up to be teenagers who were highly stressed, easily frustrated, prone to jealousy, and struggled under pressure. The 4-year-olds who delayed gratification grew up to be socially competent, personally effective, and academically superior. Here is the most shocking statistic: the children who waited 15 minutes scored, on average, 210 points higher on their SATs than the children who ate the marshmallow immediately. A child's ability to resist a marshmallow at age 4 was a better predictor of their SAT score than their actual IQ. Why? Because goal-directed, self-imposed delay of gratification is the absolute essence of emotional self-regulation. If you want to get a high SAT score, you have to stay home and study on a Friday night while your friends are out at a party. You have to delay the instant gratification of the party for the long-term gratification of the college acceptance letter. If you want to build a business, you have to delay the gratification of buying a new car, and reinvest the money into your company. Impulse control is the master aptitude. If you cannot control your impulses, your intelligence is completely useless. You will always sabotage your long-term goals for a cheap, temporary thrill. Chapter 7: Optimism and the Power of Flow. If impulse control is the engine of motivation, optimism is the fuel. In popular culture, optimism is portrayed as toxic positivity, walking around with a fake smile, ignoring the bad things in the world. In psychology, optimism is a highly specific, clinical mechanism for explaining failure. Dr. Martin Seligman, a pioneer of positive psychology, discovered that the way you explain failure to yourself dictates your entire future. When a pessimist fails a sales pitch, they attribute the failure to a characteristic that is permanent and pervasive. They say, "I am a terrible salesperson. I have no charisma. I will never close a deal." Because they believe the failure is permanent, it will never change, and pervasive, it ruins everything, they lose all motivation. They quit. When an optimist fails the exact same sales pitch, they attribute the failure to a characteristic that is temporary and specific. They say, "The client was in a bad mood today, and I didn't prepare my slides well enough. Next time, I will research the client better." Because they believe the failure is temporary, it can be fixed, and specific, it was just this one client, their motivation remains completely intact. They bounce back immediately. Optimism is an emotional intelligence skill that prevents apathy, hopelessness, and depression in the face of tough going. It is the refusal to let a temporary setback define your permanent identity. When you master impulse control and weaponize optimism, you gain access to the ultimate pinnacle of emotional intelligence. It is a psychological state known as flow. First identified by psychologist Mihai Csikszentmihalyi, flow is the state in which people are so involved in an activity that nothing else seems to matter. Think of a master musician playing a piano concerto, a surgeon performing a complex operation, or a coder building a massive software architecture. In a state of flow, the amygdala is completely quiet. There is no anxiety, no anger, and no distraction. Your emotions are not suppressed, they are perfectly, flawlessly aligned with the task at hand. The ego disappears. Time distorts, 5 hours feel like 5 minutes. Flow is the ultimate motivator, because the act of doing the work becomes its own absolute reward. How do you engineer flow? You must find the exact Goldilocks zone between your skill level and the challenge. If a task is too hard, you feel anxiety. If a task is too easy, you feel boredom. But if the challenge perfectly stretches your current abilities, forcing you to give 100% of your focus to survive, you drop into flow. Flow is emotional intelligence at its absolute maximum capacity. It is the harnessing of human emotion to produce flawless, effortless excellence. Chapter 8: Empathy. If self-awareness is the ability to read your own emotions, empathy is the ability to read the emotions of everyone else. It is pillar number 4 of emotional intelligence. But empathy is widely misunderstood. In the corporate world, people think empathy means being soft, crying with your employees, or being a therapist. Daniel Goleman strips away the fluff. Empathy is not about being nice. Empathy is data collection. If you lack empathy, you are operating entirely blind in the social world. Narrator: the 90% rule of communication. To understand why empathy is a survival skill, you must realize a startling fact about human communication. Words are the language of the rational mind. Body language, tone of voice, and facial expressions are the language of the emotional mind. Researchers have found that when people communicate an emotion, 90% of the message is nonverbal. If a coworker crosses their arms, avoids eye contact, and mutters, "I said it's fine," their words are saying, yes, but 90% of their biological data is screaming, no. If you only listen to the words people say, you are deaf to the actual conversation. The amygdala does not speak in vocabulary, it speaks in microexpressions, posture, and vocal pitch. The empathetic person has trained their brain to pick up on these subtle, invisible cues. Where does empathy come from? Why do some people possess it, while others are entirely oblivious? It begins in infancy, through a process called attunement. When a baby cries, it cannot use words. It relies entirely on the mother or father to read its distress and respond with a matching, soothing emotion. When the parent responds accurately, the baby's nervous system learns that its emotions are valid and that it is connected to the world. But if a parent consistently ignores the baby, or responds to the baby's sadness with coldness or anger, the baby's emotional radar breaks. It stops trying to express its needs. It learns to disconnect. Adults who lack empathy are often those who experienced a lack of attunement in childhood. They suffer from a mild form of what psychologists call alexithymia, the inability to read or describe emotions. They treat human beings like logical machines, and they are constantly baffled when the people around them get angry or upset, for no reason. Chapter 9, Emotional Contagion. Once you can read emotions, you must understand how they spread. Human biology features a bizarre, fascinating anomaly. Most of the systems in your body are closed loop. Your circulatory system does not need another human being to pump your blood. But the human limbic system, your emotional brain, is an open-loop system. This means that our emotional biology is literally wired to be regulated by the people around us. Because we are an open-loop system, emotions are highly contagious. If you sit across from someone who is smiling, warm, and relaxed, your brain's mirror neurons will automatically fire. Your heart rate will synchronize with theirs. Your facial muscles will instinctively mimic their smile, and your brain will release dopamine. You will literally catch their good mood. Conversely, if you sit across from a boss who is vibrating with toxic anger, cortisol, and stress, your amygdala will detect the threat. Even if the boss doesn't yell at you, your brain will absorb their toxic frequency. You will leave the meeting feeling exhausted and anxious. Every time you interact with another human being, an invisible biological negotiation takes place. One person will transmit their emotion, and the other person will catch it. This biological phenomenon is the absolute secret of leadership. Who determines which emotion wins the negotiation? Usually, the person who is the most emotionally expressive, or the person who holds the most power, sets the emotional tone for the entire room. In a company, the leader is the emotional sender. Everyone else is the receiver. If a CEO walks into a crisis meeting terrified, erratic, and screaming, the entire executive team will catch the panic virus. Their amygdalas will hijack their logical brains. The collective IQ of the room will drop by 50 points, and they will make terrible, destructive decisions. But if the CEO walks into that exact same crisis meeting exuding an aura of absolute, unshakable calm, the team's mirror neurons will latch onto that calm. The leader's regulated nervous system will literally soothe the nervous systems of 50 other people. The team's logical brains will stay online, and they will solve the problem. The lesson: leadership is not about your title, your intelligence, or your strategy. Leadership is your ability to manage your own emotional state so effectively that you transmit confidence, calm, and motivation into the nervous systems of the people around you. You are emotionally contagious. The only question is, what virus are you spreading? Chapter 10, The Social Arts. We now arrive at pillar number 5, social skills. Social skills are the culmination of the previous 4 pillars. You are self-aware, you are regulated, you are motivated, and you are empathetic. Now, you must use those skills to navigate the hardest part of human existence: conflict. How do you handle a failing employee? How do you argue with your spouse without destroying the marriage? Narrator: the fundamental attribution error. When people give criticism, they almost always trigger an amygdala hijack in the other person because they commit a massive psychological mistake. It is called the fundamental attribution error. When someone makes a mistake, we do not attack the behavior. We attack their character. Bad critique: attacking character. You are always so lazy and irresponsible. You ruined this project. The result: the recipient's amygdala detects a mortal threat to their identity. They instantly go into fight or flight. They stop listening to your feedback, and they focus 100% of their energy on defending themselves and attacking you back. The feedback is entirely lost. Daniel Goleman teaches the formula for the artful critique. The goal of a critique is not to punish. The goal is to correct a behavior while keeping the other person's logical brain entirely online. To do this, you must make them feel safe. The artful critique relies on the XYZ formula: when you did X, it made me feel Y, and I would rather you do Z. 1. Be specific. The X do not bring up mistakes from 3 years ago. Focus on one specific, objective event. When you turned the quarterly report in 3 days late without emailing me. 2. Focus on impact, not character. The why do not call them lazy. State the result of their action. It made me look unprepared in front of the client, and it caused the team massive stress. 3. Offer a solution. The Z criticism without a solution is just complaining. Give them a clear path back to success. In the future, if you are falling behind, I need you to communicate with me 24 hours in advance so we can adjust the timeline. 4. Do it face to face, with empathy. Never give harsh criticism over email or text. It strips away all nonverbal empathy, and the recipient's brain will assume the most hostile, aggressive tone possible. Sit down with them. Keep your vocal tone calm and regulated so you transmit emotional safety. When you use the artful critique, the recipient does not feel attacked as a human being. Their amygdala stays quiet. They can logically process the mistake and correct it. What happens when you use all the tools of emotional intelligence, and the other person is simply toxic? What if your boss is a narcissist, or a family member refuses to regulate their own anger? Emotional intelligence does not mean being a punching bag. If you are dealing with someone who is chronically hijacked, someone who thrives on screaming, manipulating, and dumping their toxic emotional virus onto you, your ultimate social skill is boundary setting. Remember emotional contagion. If you stay in the room with a toxic person, your nervous system will be poisoned. You use your self-awareness to notice your own stress rising. You use your self-regulation to stay calm. And you use your social skills to draw a firm, unbreakable line. I can see that you are incredibly angry right now, and I want to solve this problem. But I will not be spoken to with that tone. We can continue this conversation this afternoon when we have both cooled down. And then, you physically leave the room. You protect your open-loop system. You do not let their emotional sickness infect your mind. Conclusion: the new paradigm of genius. You have reached the end of the methodology. Look at the psychological evolution you have undergone over these 3 masterclass sessions. You no longer view your emotions as an uncontrollable mystery. You know exactly what is happening under the hood. You know about the ancient, rapid-fire limbic system and the logical neocortex. You know that an amygdala hijack is a biological override, and you know how to stop it by stepping onto the balcony of self-awareness and naming your emotions. You no longer believe the myth that venting anger helps. You know it is a poison. You use self-regulation to cool the fire, soothe your anxiety, and pull yourself out of melancholy. You have unlocked the ultimate predictor of success, the ability to delay gratification, and you know how to channel that motivation into the effortless, flawless state of flow. And as you step into the world, you will not be blind. You will use empathy to read the 90% of communication that is completely silent. You will understand that your emotional state is contagious, and you will step into the role of a true leader by transmitting calm, unshakable confidence to everyone in the room. When conflict arises, you will not attack character, you will use the artful critique to correct behavior, and you will set ironclad boundaries to protect your peace. For 100 years, society told us that our destiny was written in our genetics. They told us that if we didn't have a high IQ, we were destined for mediocrity. Daniel Goleman has handed you the ultimate, devastating, beautiful truth. IQ is a static number. It is largely fixed at birth. But emotional intelligence is a muscle. It is a learnable, trainable, upgradable skill set. You can literally rewire the neural pathways of your own brain through conscious practice. You do not need to be a math genius to lead a company. You do not need a perfect SAT score to build an extraordinary marriage. You just need to master yourself, and master how you treat the people around you. Thank you for listening. Please like, share, comment and subscribe my channel. you.